just for you and me. The dogwood was never to grow strong and tall again. Hello, this is Lonnie Jones, and doing my life story, telling some of the stuff that I can remember in my life story, and how God helped me get through a lot of things that I probably couldn't have gotten through had it not been for God. And there's a lot of them. Sometimes I can maybe do an episode and might not involve God some way, form, or fashion, but He's in there at any rate. And I'm going to back up from, I did episode 15, and this is episode 16, so I'm going to have to back up because I forgot a whole episode about a place that I worked before I ever went to Bennett Tool and Die, which most of you knows about Bennett Tool and Die. But this before I got into the machine shop tool and die business. I worked for a company called it was called Warren Brothers Warren, W-A-R-R-E-N, Warren Brothers Roads Company. It was a big paving company, probably the biggest at the time in Nashville, Tennessee. And this was also the year that my son was born in 1963. So when I had quit the Regal Manufacturing Company, I had gotten this job with Warren Brothers Roads Company, and what I was doing with them is I was weighing asphalt out on all the dump trucks on scales. I worked in the scale house, and we were down on Cowan Street, right about where they got to hit the golf balls and everything now. I'm not too sure what they call that, but anyway, they got a big screen up down there now, and they hit golf balls and serve food and such as that. But that's where we were at on County Street. We made our own asphalt. So anyway, what I actually done is I weighed the trucks in, I weighed them out. When a truck would come in, the truck would come in empty. We'd weigh the when it was empty and write it down. When he come back out, we wrote down how heavy it was, and that told us how many tons of asphalt they had on the truck. And back in those days, I don't even think they had a triple axle dump truck at the time. I'm sure they did, but I don't think this company did have them. And they had a double axle, and they had all types. They had Chevrolets, GMCs, they had Macs, and I got a little story about a Mac truck, for instance. But they had all these different types of dump trucks, and they would haul. The maximum they would haul was approximately 20 tons. Was the maximum they'd ever try to haul on one of the double axle ones, and they haul about 10 to 12 ton on a single axle. But while I got the trucks on mine, let me tell you about the Mack truck. It's another breed of truck. I'm telling you, it was then. It probably is not that bad now, but back then, don't misunderstand me. The Mack truck wasn't a bad truck, but a Mack truck was somewhat complicated to shift the gears and all that type of thing, because the Mack trucks they had two gear shift levers in it. Well, my experience with the Mack truck, and what's funny about it was, I never did figure it out. But the boy went down, filled his truck up with asphalt, come back and got on the scales, and he had to go to the bathroom. Well, I had other people coming in that needed to get on the scales, so I proposed to go out and move that Mack truck. Well, that Mack truck had two gear shifts, and until this day, I have never got that truck in gear. I could not move that truck off the scale. Now, you can call that stupid, you can call it about anything you want to call it, but I had no clue how to get that truck in gear, and I tried both gear shifts in every kind of direction I could, and I never got that Mack truck to move. We had to wait on the boy to come back from the bathroom to get, and another stupid thing, I should have got him to show me how he did it at the time, and I didn't. And till this day, I couldn't move one of those trucks probably. But that's a little deal I had with Mack trucks with two gear shifts and me not knowing which one to move where to and so forth to get it moved. But he came back from the bathroom and got it moved, and we proceeded on with the operation of me weighing in and weighing out. So we would have sometime we would have to pave an intersection, and we have to pave it like 3 o'clock in the morning before the traffic started. For instance, I helped drive a truck which was not a Mack truck. Boy didn't show up for work one morning at 3 o'clock, and we had to pave Spring Street. That's down where First Street goes through, and Jefferson Street comes across the end of the bridge. Most people I'm talking to knows where Spring Street four-way crossway is at. We had to pave that at 3 o'clock in the morning. One of the truck drivers didn't show up. So I'm weighing trucks out. So the boss says, will you drive one of the trucks? We need another load to go on Spring Street. And can you drive this other truck? Because all the other trucks were full. So I had to wait all the trucks out that I needed to. And I got mine full of asphalt. And then I proceeded to go on down to Spring Street and help them pave Spring Street. And I had never driven a dump truck full of asphalt in front of a paving machine before. Well, there's a little story there too. Now I went down to Spring Street, and Spring Street is just level. Level is a flow is out here. So we went down there and we got it paved. It took us about 3 hours, but we got it paved before rush hour come through. So that was my experience with driving a truck that night. Well, approximately 3 months later, we needed to pave another street, and I do not know the name of the street, but today all of TV stations get up on this bridge up above 65 North and take pictures back towards Nashville, and I don't know what the name of that road is there across that bridge. But we had to pave, not the bridge, but on either side of that bridge from one intersection down to the other intersection at 3 o'clock in the morning. And it's on a hill, a pretty good little grade. And I got the task of having to drive a truck again in front of a paver. So I got my truck loaded and went over there, got in front of the paver. Well, going uphill is a whole lot different than going on a level. You have to help that paver. The paver cannot push the whole truck, and you got 10, 15 tons of asphalt on it. The paver normally will push your truck on level, but going uphill, you have to be in gear and helping that move. Well, quite naturally, I hadn't done it but one time ever, and never on a hill. So about halfway through the dump, I pulled out too far and dumped about a ton of asphalt in front of the paver. Well, let me tell you, that didn't go over good with the guys with the shovels. That didn't sit well at all. So I got a good chewing out, and I was let me know that truck had to stay against that paver at all times, and I had to learn how to do it. So anyway, I got through that night. So my little deal in front of a paving machine with asphalt on it was quite an experience. One worked out real well, the other one not so well. But we survived it and got through it. They put me back in scale house, and I don't know whether there was a reason or not for them never to ask me to drive another truck full of asphalt or not. I don't know, but I never did have to do it again. So I worked all summer with them, and they paved the off ramps, most off ramps and the shoulders. They paved those from somewhere around Kingston Springs all the way to Buffalo Valley. And some of you know where Buffalo Valley is at, and some won't. But Buffalo Valley is up in East Tennessee on I-40, up near Cookville. It's before you get to Cookville. I believe it's at Center Hill Lake. I believe there's a Center Hill Lake up there. Buffalo Valley is there. So what they would do is wherever they were paving in the area, they had a portable asphalt. It would make its own asphalt, but it was portable. They have to tear it down, put it on trucks, move it to location so they wouldn't have to haul it so far. So they had a deal made up somehow where they made their own asphalt, which I don't think it was that hard to make. You just had to have the oil that went in the asphalt that bound it together, and of course that was a certain kind of asphalt, I'm sure. So they would portably move their plant. We kept the plant down on Cowan Street for locals to keep using, but we would have a portable plant that we'd move from site to site, so we wouldn't have to haul over 5 miles at a time. So they had one in Buffalo Valley, and they had one down near Dixon at one time. So that was sort of how that they did the paving when the interstate come through, I-40 come through, I-24, when all this come through, they were big involved in this. And this is, again, in 1963. And in 1963, in June the 27th, that's when my son was born. And I worked at the asphalt company at that time when he was born. And so the next thing about that is wintertime was coming on, and most everybody was being laid off because it was cold. Back in those days, we had it wasn't in 1963. It wasn't nothing to having a 12-inch snow on the ground or having an ice storm come through, and it would get cold. Back in those days, it would be cold. Much colder than it's getting around here now. Of course, that could change. We don't know. That's totally up to God. That's God's area. It's not mine. So wintertime was coming on. People was getting laid off. So I worked in the scale house, and my boss. He worked in the scale house, so he stayed on. So what they done? They made me a night watchman. Well, I was the night watchman for that winter. So I worked as a night watchman for, I guess, about 2 months, close to 2 months. I think it was November, December, probably was into January. And one of the boss's sons was a bluegrasser. He loved bluegrass music, had a guitar, and could sing bluegrass. And so it turns out that I played a little music myself, so I had a guitar. So during my walking my beats around doing the night watching, we would sit down and we would sing, because every 30 minutes I would have to go on a watch. So we'd sit down and sing and pick and everything for about 30 minutes. About every night he would come over, and they call him Butch Haney. Haney was one of the owners. I don't know what the owner's first name was, but his last name was Haney, and he had a son named, they called him Butch. I don't know what his first name was, but we picked and grinned, and so they decided they was going to build them a new scale house. That's where the scales was at. In the wintertime, they wasn't using scale house that much. So they decided they were going to build a little scale house. So they tore the scale house down, and it was about, I think it was, temperature was probably in the 20s between 20 and 30 degrees. So when they poured the foundation and the concrete for the floor in the scale house, they got these big salamander heaters, whatever you want to call them, a torpedo heater, what you want to call it, about so big around and about so long, and they ran off of kerosene. You had to keep them full of kerosene. Well, I was supposed to keep kerosene in that heater, in those heaters. I think they had about 3 or 4 heaters set up. I was supposed to keep kerosene in those heaters. Well, I got a little bit busy of picking and grinning and forgot all about putting kerosene. It's something I never had to do before, so it wasn't on the watch. So I forgot to put kerosene in the heaters. Well, next morning about 10 o'clock, there was a knock on my door because I was working nights, night watching, working nights, so I hadn't gotten out of bed yet. There was a knock on my door. And the guy from Warren Brothers asked me, he said, "Did you put kerosene in those heaters last night?" And of course, it hit me. I didn't. And that's the only job I've ever been fired from in my life, but they fired me. Because all the concrete had to be busted up, taken up, and re-poured. So needless to say, the last knock I got on my door from Warren Brothers was getting fired, and I never set foot back on Warren Brothers property again. Now, nobody was mad at me. It's just, it was a lesson time. Take care of your job. So as far as I know, that's the only job I've ever was ever fired from. Meanwhile, you know, Ronnie was young, and so this is back to where I get back to, I had moved, and I hadn't gone to work for Mr. Ferris yet because if you remember back in 3 or 4 episodes, I went to work for Bennett Tool and Die. Well, this was just prior to me going to work for Bennett Tool and Die. So when they fired me, then I didn't have a job. Well, the word got out I didn't have a job. Well, this is an experience I had with topping trees and being in the tree business. I didn't last long either. This is not going to take long, let me tell you this. Guy come and knocked on my door and told me he had a big tree needed to top. He needed to top this big tree down on Rosebank Avenue, that's East Nashville, right off of Riverside Drive. Well, I was at the time living on Rosebank, on the Rosebank down near the Shelby Park area. Well, that Rosebank comes all the way around. It comes back out, way back up, near Porter Road, for instance. So anyway, he had this big tree he wanted to top down there. Well, I never topped a tree in my life. I didn't have a clue. But I could use a chainsaw. He knew that. Well, it was a huge tree. It was a big elm tree. And it must have been 100 foot in the air. Well, my job was to climb that tree and go up and cut the limbs off, let them fall down, and then they'd get rid of the limbs down there. Well, first of all, I'm scared of heights. And second of all, the wind was blowing about 30 miles an hour. So I did get up in that tree. I got up in that tree, and I got about 50 foot up in that tree, and that tree just started swaying, and the wind was blowing. And I managed to get back down out of that tree and told him that I wasn't topping no trees. So I guess I fired myself. But at any rate, I did not top that tree. I got down out of that tree before I fell out and killed myself. And I wasn't too far from home at the time, so he wasn't going to carry me home because I quit. So I had to walk about, I guess it was close to a mile. It was at least a mile from my house or more. So I had to walk home, and it was cold, and the wind was blowing again. So that was my experience with topping trees, my first experience with topping trees. And it was a long, long time before I topped any more trees, and I topped them in a whole different manner later on in my life. I did it a lot of different ways. But anyway, I lived on Rosebank Avenue, right beside the railroad tracks, just before it went down and hit Riverside Drive. Some call it Riverside Drive, some call it Double Drive. You can call it anything you want to. One road going this way on beside of a medium, and the one coming back this other way, and it goes from Shelby Park to comes out almost to Gallatin Road where Kroger's is in Inglewood. Don't hardly get up to Kroger's. It cuts off before you get to Kroger's, but that's how far Riverside Drive or Double Drive runs. And I lived just off of that. And that's where I was living as well when I was working for Warren Brothers. But anyway, Ronnie come along at that time, and in that summer, but at the time Ronnie had come along, I was right in the middle of me working for Warren Brothers, and on Thursdays payday was on Thursday with Warren Brothers. I'll back up just a little bit before they fired me, but payday was always on Thursday, or if it rained Thursday, of course everybody got paid, and then everybody got to go home. Well, me being newly married, basically still newly married and everything, I hadn't totally took the responsibility that home is where I need to go. So instead of me going home where I should have went, I went to the pool hall with some of the other guys. And I did at that time. I wasn't even drinking at that time yet. I didn't drink. I might have had a beer or two every now and then, but we'd go to a pool hall. We went to the pool hall, and I shot pool all that afternoon, and didn't hit a lick at work because it was raining. So I got home a little bit late. It was after dark. Of course, it was in the middle of the summer, so it was still daylight, 8 o'clock, but I had got home way after I should have. And we had, because we had Ronnie, we were living with Jerry's mom and dad. We were staying with them for a little while because of Ronnie, her having to take care of Ronnie. So needless to say, when I did finally get home, I got a good chewing about that, and of course I woke up to the fact and realized, you're a family man now. You got to act like a family man. So that sunk in. There was never no more problem out of that, because I realized that was wrong, the wrong thing to do. So, and at the time, we were staying there with them, and Ronnie was, I think we only stayed over. We stayed over probably close to 30 days, I guess, because I couldn't change a diaper. I didn't know how to change a diaper, but you know what I'm saying. So my wife, Jerry, or Geraldine was her name. Jerry, she was able to take care of all that stuff after about a month, and we went back over to Rosebank. And another thing that I wanted to tell in this little story, well, they were paving the road pretty close to where I was living. Well, they had almost 12 tons of asphalt left over from the job, and it was real hot. The asphalt was real hot and ready to spread and everything. And these boys could take those trucks and put this chain on there with what they call a spreader gate, and they could spread that stuff. And gravel, they could spread it just smooth as could be. Make a long story short, the guys said, have you got anything place you can put this asphalt, or we're going to have to throw it away? Well, in the back of I lived in a duplex. So in the back of the duplex was a double driveway back there, and it was just dirt and grass and gravel. So I said, yeah. I said, bring it over. And I said, we'll put it in the driveway behind where I live. So they did. He brought that truck over there with about close to 12 ton of asphalt on it. He laid the prettiest driveway you ever seen. The only problem with we didn't have a roller to roll it. So when it laid out there, it was pretty when it first laid out there, real pretty and everything. But then after not having anything to roll it and pack it with, it naturally got rougher than the dickens. And it turned out to be, honestly, we moved before we had to take it up, but I'm sure they had to take it up at a later date because it was a mess after it had got hard and had places in it where we drove on it and all that stuff. It would been just a beautiful free driveway if we'd have just had the roller. And believe it or not, I could have got them to brought the roller over and rolled it for me if I'd have just thought about it. But that was another experience with asphalt. And if you don't, when you spread it and you don't roll it, you're in trouble about 8 hours later, and a whole lot of trouble. If you touch it, drive on it, do anything to it before that, you're gonna be in trouble. But anyway, that was a little experience we had there. Then we moved from there, and we moved over, and we moved from there, and we moved over in the Bellshire subdivision from there, and that's when Mr. Ferris was asking me about being mechanically inclined and all that stuff. So, but Warren Brothers hadn't parted me at that point. So at that point, we moved over there, and then we go back to where I got fired that winter, and then. But there's still a little story here about Bellshire Drive and moving over there. Actually, that's not true. I had already went to work for Mr. Ferris. It's hard to remember all this stuff off the cuff. I really needed to write everything down to get it down pat. But I was actually working for Mr. Ferris when we moved from Rosebank over to Bellshire subdivision. Well, we moved over there, and we moved right up on top of this hill. And the driveway was like that. I mean, it was real steep, and it was gravel. Well, I was drag racing back in those days. I was drag racing, and I had a 65 Chevrolet pickup truck that blew the motor up in, but I had all my junk in my drag racing, everything that I had to do with drag racing, axles and rear ends and tires and wheels, all that was in the back of this pickup truck and in the front seat of the pickup truck because we were moving. So when we got over there, I didn't have no way of getting it over there, so I was able to pull it over there, but I couldn't get it up the driveway. I couldn't get it up the driveway. Well, one of the boys at work, his name's Bill Zimmerly, at work with me at Mr. Ferris, he had this Cadillac. He said we'd pull that truck up there. Well, we need to talk a lot about Bill, and I'm going to run out of time about talking about Bill on this program. So I'm going to add Bill into this program on I think be number 17. I'm on 16 right now, so I'm going to stop at this point right here and tell you about going up that driveway with that truck and living on that hill and what all can go wrong. And in this next one, going to tell you what God did for me. Let me tell you. I'm going to tell you what God did for me on the 17th episode. This is going to be one you don't want to miss, because God is really, he's helping me along as it is in lots of ways. Me being fired was probably one of the best things that happened to me. I don't think he meant for me to forget, but I did forget to fill those heaters up. I did. So in my life, there's almost never a change made in my life that it wasn't for the better. And who else but God handles that? God handles that. So I'm going to cut off here on episode 16, and we're going to pick up on episode 17 of going up the driveway with a truck loaded with a ton of junk, and what God has done for me. So, and meanwhile, don't want you to forget that we go to the Friendship Missionary Baptist Church at 101 Flat Ridge Road in Millersville, Tennessee. We go up there Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. We'd love to see you there. And got a great preacher, and he'll tell you what God can do and will do for you. And until episode 17, we'll stop here. We'll pick up on episode 17, and we'll show you what God really, really done for me in the next episode. You don't want to miss episode 17. 16 was a little boring. 17 not a bit boring. So till 17, episode 17, we'll see you there. Thanks. Fine job. All right, here's one called the Blue Ridge Cabin Home. There's a well-beaten path on that old mountainside. I wondered when I was a lad. I wandered along to a place I call home. Your Blue Ridge Hills are away. I love those hills of Virginia. From those Blue Ridge Hills I did roam. When I die, won't you bury me on the mountain, far away in my Blue Ridge mountain home. My thoughts wandered back to that brown shackle shack, those Blue Ridge Hills far away. My mother and dad, they are laid there to rest, sleep together there. I love those hills of Virginia, from old Blue Ridge hills I roam. When I die, won't you bury me on the mountain, far away in my Blue Ridge mountain home. I returned to that old cabin home with a sigh, longing for days gone by. When I die, won't you bury me on that old mountainside, and my resting place upon a hill so high. I love those hills for Virginia, from the old Blue Ridge hills I did roam. When I die, won't you bury me on the mountain, far away to my Blue Ridge mountain home. Oh, I love those hills of Virginia, from the old Blue Ridge hills I did roam. When I die, won't you bury me on the mountain, far away to my Blue Ridge mountain home, far away to my Blue Ridge mountain home. Blue Ridge mountain home. Jesus died on the cross from a dogwood tree. He gave his life and soul just for you and me. The dogwood was never to grow strong and